Hello everyone, I am Exicon Extratroya, and welcome to the second Q&A of DreamSmack Studio. There are two groups of people who've asked questions involving the DSS project, and that is the people of the Smack Studio community, along with Rouge Loveful and her friends. We'll start off with the people of the Smack Studio community, which was only two people. Let's get to it. Aaron's asked, do you ever plan on going back to your older characters and ever giving them updates? Stuff like higher quality sprites, when the ones you have to compress, and custom sound effects and voice lines? For sprites, no. This is way too much work for me to handle. I can't go back to each sprite one by one to do that. It's just too much for me. And considering how I've discovered that I can collapse from going through tedious work like that, that's not good. Certain tediousness, yes, but I have to have a passion for it to make sure I get the fixes. Updating sprites is not one of them. But sound effects, custom sound effects, yes. Because I used sound effects from Smack Studio before custom ones could be added, it is making a proper immersion from how things are working already, so I can add them at any time. Especially when it came to Guitar Man, but also wanting to work on the Devastation Beam, which is of course Full Gorse Ultra, in updating the sound effects that way. So that is a possibility. We won't have to worry about that. But voice lines, on the other hand, since that has never been implemented into my characters, that means it has to be done properly. And since not all characters have voice lines I can work with, but yet it's a character that I definitely want to have voice lines in the first place, this means that this cannot be done. Considering that I already thought about treating my characters involving voices similar to Rivals of Aether where there were no voices at all, I'm going to keep it like that for the immersion that I desire to work on, involving about how I'm making my characters. Not to mention if I was to do voice lines, that actually limits the options that I have of who I want to add into DSS. So it really becomes counterproductive. I just don't want to do that. But sound effects, absolutely. Depends on what I have, depends on what I'd find out, and really depends on the quality. So, yeah. Rock Emblem asks, what characters you scrapped or began working on but didn't finish for whatever reason? There is an incomplete redacted character, that's for certain. The information can be found on the DSS site. But if we want to go with scrapped characters, I would say Gura and Nerissa from Hololive. Gura because there was no 3D model at the time I can work with, and because she's already the most popular in Hololive, that someone else from Gen 1 should deserve the spotlight, and that's where Mori comes in. And Nerissa, well, Shiori's already in, she's from the same gen, Gen 3, and I thought about one per gen of Hololive English, so Nerissa was removed. If there was someone else that I would mention that I'm pretty much sure that I'm not going to bring into DSS, I'd say the Blue Knight from Gauntlet Dark Legacy. I know, that's a shocker, but yeah. Okay, up next are the questions from Rouge Loveful and her friends. Let's do this. Rouge Loveful asks, if a character with sprites in a certain art style is in the project, but one you want to add from the same IP doesn't, would you still go through with adding that character? It heavily depends on what art styles we're talking about. If we make an art style differ from each character of the same IP, possibly, but I've never really tested that to see if there's any true impact that matches with my motivation and design of what I intend for DSS. But yeah, it really depends. Crystal Starlight asks, what is the current info of the immersion of DSS? Okay, so in proper immersion, it all depends on how it's expanded. It all starts with Teddy. I'm so glad I have a chart for this. So we have Teddy. Obviously, not a pro tag, so we need a pro tag. There you go. As you can see, it extends, just like that. Of course, Shantae's also a pro tag, so there's that connection. But of course, then we started going with more expansions, such as, small team rather than big team, and then goes with unique properties there. We also have Cubix, being not from a video game as his origin, but rather an animation, but has video games. And then we have Combo Heavy, which of course we have Seth, that goes with movement combo, combo alternative, which is like ground-like combos at the majority. So we have that. And then we have something that's not from a fighting game, but rather an FPS, so similar to fighting. And then along with that, there's also an iconic factor. Then there's RPG, so of another fighting game being iconic. We have two other genres. Then we have added pro tag for the same IP, so there's of course Yuna Akami. Then we went from video games of playing a character to pretty much being your own character, and that's where an avatar comes in. So of course there's that, and as you can see, that also relates to different forms of avatars being outside of a game, of course, that means, VTubers. That's where Mori comes in. And then +1 in the IP, and then we got one that's voted. So, yeah. And then there's one that is also voted, which of course was Simon Blackwell. That goes with implications of combat, so he got in. And of course, alternative combat, which of course is Gitaroo Man. So that's kind of like the immersion that's going on here, involving about the process of who gets in and who doesn't. And this is bound to improve, but I am still thinking of the ways of how that's going to go. So, yeah, I hope that explains it. Tessie Liln asks, you have main and bonus characters. Will there be other release types in the future? Possibly, but just one. I'll let you all know when that time comes, if it ever does. Kamina Lockstride asks, would you go as far as to purchase and or rig 3D models to get a character made? Absolutely. I am bound to do that. May not be much, but only if I truly want a character to get in. But for 2D, that's going to be a different story. Probably not that, but definitely 3D. Mika Vetiso asks, is there a limit to how many characters per IP there will be in the project? Yes, I have decided that the maximum will be 4 characters. The only exception is if a character makes a bigger impact of their own series rather than intellectual property. That is possible, to have more in that IP sense. But for now, involving the direct ways of the intellectual property, if a character is known from the IP rather than their own series in that kind of extent, then yeah, it will be 4. Rhea Serenity asks, is there going to be a 4th Hololive member joining DSS? Of course it's going to be Rhea that asked this question, and to answer it, yes. Nimu Cirrus asks, could a non-character from an IP make it into DSS? Since DSS is located in a dimension that is not the actual characters, rather replicas, yes, this is possible, without a doubt. Jessa Viewpoint asks, besides Hololive, are there other VTubers that can make it in? Yes, but it's strict. They have to be VTubers I follow to make sure I get a good way to communicate with in order for this to work, and only 3 of them come to mind that I would love to have as a character, as long as said people approve of it. Namanea Sia asks, what is the biggest motivation you have in DSS? People would think, oh, it's definitely gotta be the characters he's adding, or oh, it's definitely gotta be the way the characters would fight, what their fighting style is, what mechanics they have. And though these are very big in motivation, they're not the biggest. The biggest motivation I have is actually the trailers. Without the trailers, there would be no characters. That there is the biggest in motivation. I know it's a shocker, but yeah, there you have it, trailers. Yalexis Amplisound asks, stages have music based on their IP, while others don't, including DSS ones. How far would you go with the latter? Pretty far, really. Copyright concerns are definitely something with Hololive Office, so I added a different song from there. Mountainside Temple and the Hub 2017 stages obviously don't have music of their own, so I added music from there. Guess what? All 3 of these songs came from the series Need for Madness. They got some interesting songs to work with. And of course, DSS without a doubt. If there's stages that I'm not really fully comfortable of adding for various reasons, I could make a DSS variation or DSS inspired kind of like stage instead. That can make up for it, so yeah, it'll go pretty far. Without a doubt, I don't see a stop. Emperor Alclazera asks, how many gift stages do you think you would make? Probably like 3 to 5. I know there's the DSS Roblox stage and also a different stage that I've been thinking about involving a certain VTuber, but when it comes to gift stages, this is possible. Now, involving trailers of the sort, these may be the only exception, it really depends, but yeah, we'll see what happens. But right now in my mind, 3 to 5. Amajo Bassano asks, is there an update on characters joining DSS if someone already made one in the Smack Studio Workshop? So, considering DSS is meant for characters to face against each other in the project, but not any other characters from the Smack Studio Workshop, with the immersion that this implies that DSS is like its own game, then yeah, any characters that were already made can be in the DSS project. It's no different than characters being modded into Smash Brothers, or being added into Rivals of Aether, or any other kind of fan-like thing. So it makes no difference, which means, yeah, there could be characters that can get in to DSS. So that's going to be some good news, especially for characters that have sprites. Let's just see what happens, but definitely I'm going to see what I'm going to do with that. Well, not specifically that I am going to do it, but when I'm going to do it, as in as soon as possible. So get ready for that. Get ready. Anshi Tomeyer asks, could there be a stage based on us practitioners? Honestly, you girls have been very helpful, so without a doubt, yeah, I'll see what I can do. I have to make all your 3D models though for like whatever I have, especially Vroid and what Rouge has. So if I get all your models up and going, then yes. So that's all the questions, but I'm pretty sure everyone has just one more question in their minds. When is Wave 4? I'm still doing what I can. It's still planned for 2027, but we'll see. Alright, that is it for the second Q&A. Thank you all so much for listening, and may the best be upon all of you. Take care.